Restaurant Unstoppable, episode 630 with Drew Nieporent. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Drew Nieporent. Drew, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Absolutely.
Yes, that is what we like to hear. So in 1977, Drew Nieporent graduated from Cornell University with a degree from the School of Hotel Management and set out on a career in hospitality that has only been matched by few. Nieporent's first restaurant, the groundbreaking Montrachet, opened in 1985 and earned 3 stars from the New York Times and kept that rating for 21 years. That's amazing. Over the following 33 years, he would go on to form the Myriad Restaurant Group, and has opened and operated over 39 restaurants around the world, including Seattle, Louisville, Providence, Boca Raton, London, San Francisco, Moscow, Citi Field, home of the New York Mets, in Flushing, New York. And I mean, I cannot wait to dive into your story to find out how you got to where you are today and to uncover those values of just the knowledge you have and everything. It's going to be great, but let's get that motivational, inspirational, ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
You know what? I've always lived by serve it hot or serve it cold. Now, it might seem a little simplistic, but basically, when you have no money and you're a young person and you want to achieve something, you basically have to pare things down. There has to be a spare moment where you feel you can achieve your goals with very little. So in 1985, I was 29, and I set out to open a restaurant with David Boulay, who was a world-class chef, and $150,000. So, and we opened that. We got 3 stars. It's like winning the lottery without being able to collect the cash. But serve it hot or serve it cold in the food parlance is, temperatures are very important because what we do is about precision and about refined. We're trying to refine, at least we were. It might have recessed a little bit in the last couple of years, but, the simpler, the better. The distance between 2 dots is a straight line. I kind of live by that. So serve it hot. When was the last time you went to a restaurant and your food was hot? You probably, when we were kids, we used to blow on the food. It was so fucking hot. Excuse me. Now, and serve it cold. Well, I was out in Philadelphia. We did a charity, and I was serving a seafood salad. And the most important thing was that it be served chilled. I've been to a million events. They'll put something like that out on the table, unrefrigerated for hours.
Yeah.
So little things. It's like attention to detail.
It reminds me of that keep it simple, stupid kiss analogy, right?
That's what it is.
And it's a great way to get this thing started. So as you mentioned, 1985, you opened the first restaurant with the chef at the time, David Boulay. But there's a lot that happened before then. I think it makes sense to kind of take your story back to when you knew that this was going to be the industry for you. From what I gathered, it was pretty early on. You knew this was your path.
Yes. I grew up very middle class with a mother who was an actress, a very successful radio actress, Sybil Trent, who later became a casting director. And my father, who was 16 years older than my mother, got married when he was 37. My mother was 21.
Way to go, Dad.
And yeah, exactly. And they were both very good-looking people. They're very handsome father, very gorgeous mother. And I'm a second child. Me and Tracy, my brother Tracy. And my father worked for the State Liquor Authority, licensed restaurants in New York City.
Okay.
So in the 60s, the people who ran restaurants, they were right off the boat. They were your real immigrants. And the restaurants in New York, which, every nationality, Italian, German, French, of course, delicatessens, you name it. And my father, because he was part of this bureaucracy known as the State Liquor Authority, those people, they didn't really know the process. My father made it easy for them. He took the application from the bottom of the pile, he put it on the top of the pile, and for that they were indebted to him. And they said, Andy, why don't you bring your family in for dinner? And so in the 60s, we'd eat out at dozens of unbelievable restaurants. And, for me, it was the exposure. You grow up in a house with a piano, your parents make you listen to music, maybe you'll gravitate to music. I gravitated to food. And the theater of these dining out experiences was amazing. Chinese, we went to a place right next to the Ed Sullivan Theater, and the Beatles were playing, that night at Ed Sullivan. But a Sunday night, where do all the Jews go? It's a Chinese restaurant.
So we're talking like late 60s, early 70s at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I was born in 1955, so I would say, really post John F. Kennedy assassinations in 64, 65.
So when you're in all these restaurants, your dad, and you're going out with your dad and your mom, like what was the feeling like? What was there one moment, one memory that really imprinted on you that made you really go in this direction?
No, I don't think there was one moment. There were dozens of moments. It was just because my mother was an actress. She was prone to theatricality and stages, and the ultimate stage was the restaurants. They were all like sets, and the actors were the waiters, waitresses that we interacted with. The owners were all different. There was a restaurant called Headquarters. The chef, to Dwight Eisenhower, there were these huge murals on the wall of like World War II. The guy used to come around with garlic bread in like one of these, containers that you'd see at a ballpark. And, for a little kid, it's like, oh, there's the guy with the garlic bread. I mean, and little things like that. But the owners were so nice. When it was your birthday, they gave you a sparkler. If you blow out the sparkler, you can own the restaurant. All the little quibs. No, it's terrific. And when I said, I should do this. This is because I realized that I was getting an exposure that most people weren't getting.
You're building your almost like your portfolio, your mental portfolio of what your own place would be someday. You're taking little bits from all these experiences.
They were all different. Yeah. Tom Shangri-La and the Empire, Sui Ham. This Chinese guy. He never spoke a lick of English, but somehow he and my father got along famously. Charlie D'Angelo on 56th Street. I can still taste what his Italian food was like. L'Argenteuil, Café Chauveron. Some of the really classic French restaurants. So it was just natural for me to wanted to be in the food business. And then 1972, I was a student at Stuyvesant High School, which is close by here now, but Stuyvesant on 16th Street, and I took a job at McDonald's.
Okay.
Which, by the way, was probably the greatest thing. I mean, it was a great experience.
There's a lot we can learn from those big companies, especially early on when it comes to standards and operations.
I was in the airport in Chicago 2 days ago, and when you go to a McDonald's now, they give in the receipt. It says buy 1 quarter pounder, get the other free. So I looked. I'm on sort of a diet. I'm not eating a lot, but I mean that was a great deal. So I went over to the McDonald's in the airport. And the product is, it's decent. It's like, but for me in 1972, chance to meet girls, and but it was a great thing. They emphasized 3 things: QSC, quality, service, cleanliness. It was the first time they were coming into inner cities. They were really a suburban chain. So I had worked on a store on 72nd Street, and then we were opening the 23rd Street right off First Avenue. Store's still there, actually. And it was a great experience, fantastic. And then I got into Cornell.
Yeah, so why Cornell? What was it about Cornell Hotel School of Management? Because you knew you wanted to get into the restaurant industry. Why did you choose this vertical of the hotel school?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that I started looking at Lausanne and Switzerland. I was going to go to a cooking school. And then the mother of a friend of mine told my mother, she said, Cornell's got a hotel school. And we thought, oh, well, if Cornell does what they do in Lausanne, then why we would go to Switzerland? So I didn't even send in for an application. My mother borrowed their application, and I remember at the time my father got angry because it was $20, where the state universities were all $5. I mean, this literally, I have this memory.
It's big money back then.
It was big money.
Yeah.
And at Stuyvesant, I was 586 out of a class of 721.
Wow.
So I was way down, very smart kids at Stuyvesant High School. But I got in. The kids in my homeroom who were applying to Dartmouth and Yale and Harvard, whatever, the Ivy League schools, they didn't get in. They're the ones who went to Harper and Brockport and all these other state universities. But I got into Cornell and, the hotel school. I get up to the hotel school, and I realized very early in 1974 that it had nothing to do with cooking. that they taught cooking classes, but a cooking class there was open a number 10 can of onion soup and heat it up. I mean, it was crazy.
So what was it about then?
Well, it was all the disciplines. They taught law, they taught human resources, but it was a lot of crap, a lot of theories. There was a guy named Bernard Herrmann who was a real chef. He taught us a little bit about cooking, and we'd get dressed up in whites. But it wasn't a cooking school like the Culinary Institute or anything like that. So I realized I had to supplement my education. And one day when I was walking through the halls of Cornell, I saw a sign at the dean's office, and it said, "I'm interested in 6 students experienced in Russian service to sail to the following ports." And it was Oslo, Leningrad, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Dublin. I had never been anywhere. I was like, oh my God, and I had never worked as a waiter, never. And I called the student up. His name was Uwe Christensen. He was a German student. And I said, yeah, I'd like to do this. And he said, do you have experience in Russian service? And I didn't really know what he was talking about, but I said, oh, absolutely. I worked at the Concorde and the Catskills, and I know, blah, blah, blah. And I took my way on the ship. And so in 1974, not far from here, right around Houston Street, I get on this ship. It's a 600-passenger cruise ship, all first class, called the Vista Fjord. And I get changed. They give you a uniform. I get changed, and I go up to work. And I'm the only one out of 60 waiters with a blue shirt on, like I'm wearing today. And I had 59 waiters making fun of me. The other thing was that the kitchen was you got to the kitchen through an escalator. I mean, the dining room, if you can imagine, was a veritable football field. 600 seats.
Wow.
And so the kitchen was downstairs, and again, you went by escalator, and I didn't know how to carry a tray. So I was carrying a tray with 2 hands at my waist, and 59 waiters were making fun of me. But it's like riding a bicycle. And after that first year, 42-day cruise, I learned how to carry a tray, 3 fingers over my head. And I went back on the ship. Over the 4 years I was a student at Cornell, Caribbean cruises during the Christmas holidays. In the summer, we went to the North Cape, Baltic Sea, Mediterranean.
Man.
And it was like, luckily, my generation missed the lottery to the draft. They did away with it. Because really, in 73, 4, when the war was about to end, I was of age, let's just put it that way, or I was 18 years old. But luckily, I missed the military. But this was kind of like a military experience because we were literally traveling everywhere, and eating all kinds of. You have to understand, on the ship, the food was unbelievable.
I can imagine.
Well, you work 7 days a week. You work breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But I'm going up the escalator and I'm eating a sausage. I'm going down the escalator. I'm eating a lamb chop. They had 6 different pastries. I had all 6, almost every day. And I got off that ship. I went from 175 to 205 pounds. Like boom. I just gained 30 pounds in 30 days.
We like to focus on people. Are there any people during this time that really influenced you, that took you under their wing, that gave you some serious values that you hold to this day?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've had a few, what I would call mentors. They unfortunately have all passed on. There was a gentleman by the name of Roger Martin who was a PR person, marketing person, worked for Restaurant Associates, and Joe Baum, who took me under his wing. And we used to, in the early days of, he used to actually send me memos. I mean, and fax them to me, in the days of the faxes. Today we would be back and forth on Instagram or whatever it was. But he died. And then there was a great restaurateur by the name of George Lang who owned Café des Artistes, and he was very open with me. We'd have lunch and go out places. And he was very extravagant, very European. Mm-hmm. He was Hungarian.
But nobody during your time on the cruise ships that really...
No, I was 18 years old. Yeah. And on the times I was on the cruise ship, I was like 18 to 23.
So you graduate Cornell in 1977.
Right.
I know you spent at least you opened in '85, your first restaurant. So you spent some time. What were you doing during that 8-year period before opening? Like, were you living intentionally? Did you have a plan? What did that look like?
Well, the interesting thing, Eric, is that for me, life plays itself out sometimes in, you can be in an hour lecture and learn nothing, or you can be in an hour lecture and then there's a nugget of something that's said that if you hear it, if you're awake, if you hear it and you write it down, it can be like a life's lesson. And when I was at Cornell, the professor said, there's two things you have to learn. One is professional knowledge, and the other is confidence in what you know. So it's professional knowledge and confidence. And it's like, it seems like very simple, but when I was on the cruise ship, I was learning so much and I was becoming so confident that, now I was ready in my own mind to apply it to go out and do things. The one problem is hey, Drew, my classmates say, hey, Drew, what are you going to be doing after you graduate? Oh, I'm going to open my own restaurant. But it wasn't happening. So I went to work one summer when I was at Cornell, when I didn't work on the cruise ships. I went to work at Maxwell's Plum, which was an extraordinary restaurant on 64th Street and First Avenue. The owner was Warner Leroy, whose father, Mervyn Leroy, produced The Wizard of Oz. And Warner later went on to open Tavern on the Green. He put believe it or not, $3 million and built the most spectacular restaurant in the middle of Central Park, and I worked there also in 1978 after graduation. So essentially what happens is, it's 1977. I'm recruited by 3 companies, and nobody offers me a job. I wanted to work for Rock Resorts, Hyatt International, Western, I think it was called. They own the plaza, whatever. But anyway, nobody offered me a job. I went back on the cruise ships, but then I was offered a job at Maxwell's Plum, $300 a week, assistant restaurant director. I had worked there in '76, so I took that job in '78, and this restaurant, on 250 seats, would do 900 dinners on a Saturday night. It was packed. And they had a cafe setting and an area called the back room. They had 2 different menus, a more extravagant area, which the back room was sort of a replica of Maxime's of Paris. But right in the middle of the space was this amazing bar. And that was a time when heterosexuality was in, and it was boy meets girl. And they had the biggest single scene. And John and Mary, the movie with Dustin Hoffman and Mia Farrow, was filmed there. And I mean, the restaurant was packed all the time. Then when I graduate, they're opening Tavern on the Green. They offer me a position at the Tavern on the Green. I go to work at the Tavern on the Green. And that was a restaurant where you would serve 1,200 people on a Saturday night, wake up and serve 1,800 brunches next morning. So I mean, these were all proving grounds. So again, the professional knowledge, the confidence in that. And so really, that took me up to about 80.
Let's tap the brakes real quick. I want to know, because these were formative times for you, really, before opening your own place. So any key lessons? What were some of the professional knowledge? What was some of the professional knowledge you picked up during these times? Things you can share with our audience that maybe a lot of people don't know, that you can kind of reflect back. I know it was a while ago.
The restaurants are about logistics. The size of the restaurant, the bigger the restaurant is, the more staff that you have, the logistics become very problematic. They're almost mathematical. And so when you're in an environment where you're seeing, 600 meals on a cruise ship going out in an hour and a half, or you're in the dining room of Maxwell's Plum in a tiny kitchen. The kitchen wasn't even as big as this room that we're in. And they're serving 900 dinners with a menu that have 100 items on it. I mean, you see the logistics and the manner in which food has to be either pre-prepped or thought through, how it's plated, how does it stay hot, how does it get to the customer, all those things. You go to Tavern on the Green where the numbers almost double, and the problems doubled as well. I saw 1 million problems, and that's part of the education, because you say to yourself, well, when I own a restaurant, I'm not going to do it that way.
What were some things that you saw that really stood out to you that you said to yourself, I'm not going to do it that way when I open my own place?
I think my success, to a large extent, is that the generation who was doing this before me, they really didn't know what they were doing. And not only did they not know what they were doing, but they abused the staff. They were, there was almost a military-like manner in which they'd address everybody, or people were captains, waiters, busboys. There was this pecking order where people, the highest treated the lowest very poorly. And so the one lesson I learned was like, if you treat the people who are working with any sense of respect, I think they're going to wind up doing a better job. And it sounds pretty academic, but that's really a major, a major thing. The other thing is, what there was a lot of posturing, but the actual, when somebody cooked better than somebody else, it wasn't necessarily recognizable right away, because the French restaurants used to dominate in the 60s and 70s, and there was also this thing that, the customer really didn't know what they were getting. The restaurants, had dress codes and expensive prices, and, you were lucky to be able to get a reservation there. Because, ultimately, after Tavern on the Green, I went to work at La Grenouille, Le Périgord, La Reserve.
And that was my
all
next
those
question.
restaurants.
Yeah. So
because I was making I was making very good money at the Tavern on the Green, because we had a profit sharing that we had sort of innovated with the owners. And then I'll never forget, we come in to renegotiate whatever compensation we're going to get, and they raise the ceiling of the sales, under which, above a certain ceiling we would profit share. So they raised that up so high, and then they lowered the percentage under which we would share, which, was very unfair. We brought Tavern on the Green to like 30 million, I think, in 1982.
wow.
And they were going to screw us. So
I'm curious. I mean, there might be a lesson in there. What happened after that? What did the reputation of the restaurant stay what it was? Was there a degrade in the morale and the culture of the restaurant after that point?
I'm sure they had a guy named Bruce Axler. He's dead now, but they brought him in as the general manager above us, obviously. And we used to call him "Let Him Loose Bruce," because this guy was just terrible. Talk about treating staff. He wouldn't even talk to staff. He would send us memos. I used to dress like the captains because I wanted to blend in, and I wanted to do side work. Like I wanted to make a salad, carve a rack of lamb, fillet a piece of fish.
Was this when you're talking about
as a manager of Tavern on the Green?
Okay, gotcha.
I hated the managers who just stood around or they sat down and had cocktails in the middle of service. I mean, I wanted the managers to be behind the servers, and this guy Bruce Axler would send me like stupid memos. Please refrain from wearing your smoking jacket. I mean, I've never heard a tuxedo called a smoking jacket. But anyway, it was like this inane crap. And then I cared so much about what I did and how I interacted with the staff that I had one time a disciplinary situation, and the guy pissed me off, and I just punched the wall, and I broke my whatever bone that is in your hand, and I had to wear a cast, but I still, I came to work. Yeah, there was just the work was the most important thing, and also getting along with people, getting along with the chef. There's for years, maybe one of the biggest lessons about the restaurant business is that the front of the house and the back of the house never got along. Why? Because the front of the house in a busy restaurant, they'd be making great money, tremendous money, and the back of the house, these guys are killing themselves for whatever, $10 an hour. So there was always friction. Our generation, those walls were knocked down. Both literally and figuratively. We have open kitchens now in a lot of restaurants, but we just made it our business. Everybody has to work together.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you, before it was probably even coined, is the term just servant leadership. Like you were there shoulder to shoulder with the people that were going to work every day. And when you
set an example.
Yeah, people are not going to work harder than you're willing to work. And if you show them, if you set that standard, if you give them an aiming point and you show them that you're willing to get down and dirty to get the job done right beside them, that level of respect is going to be so high. And you recognize that instinctually at a young age.
And also, now that we're in this era of the Me Too, where you see the abuse of women in restaurants, certain very famous chefs. Well, first of all, abuse of any kind is wrong. One, when all this stuff is coming out, of course, I saw things like this, but then I tried to, recollect in my own restaurants, did we behave correctly? And we did. You don't treat anybody any different than you would treat yourself. In fact, the mantra used to be, treat the customer like you would treat yourself. Now it's treat the customer better than you would treat yourself. Or don't treat the customer the way you want to be treated. Treat the customer the way they want to be treated. and it takes a little time to listen to the way they want to be treated. But the whole point about this is respect and dignity. I ran the New York Marathon in 1983.
Good for you.
When I was working as a captain at a restaurant called La Reserve on 49th Street. I was able to work lunch, go to the New York Athletic Club, take off my tuxedo, run a 6 mile loop, and come back to work the dinner shift. But the period of time, you get yourself into physical condition. You're thinking about your future. And I remember running in Central Park and looking up and saying, maybe I'm never going to be able to open my own restaurant. Maybe this is not going to happen for me. Maybe I'm just going to be ordained. But I was running in New York. I was living in a village. I had lived in the village. I actually was in an incredible place, paying $100 a month.
Wow.
I don't know if you know Richard Brown, but he teaches the movie course at the New School, and he had just bought this building for peanuts. And I had a fireplace in every room. It was nuts.
$100 a month.
It was. I renovated, but anyway, the point is, I would jog all over Manhattan, and then one day I was in an area I'd never been, and on Sundays I used to pick up the New York Times, read business opportunities, and I saw there was a space. It said 1,500 square feet for $1,500 a month, Lower Manhattan. I called the number. Said West Broadway. Oh, this is where I had just been jogging, or I set off to jog there, and it was in the middle, no place, And I looked at the space, and I said, well, I can afford $1,500 a month. That's $50 a day. And I signed the lease. And when I signed the lease there, I didn't have a pot to piss in, but we raised $50,000 from my money, $50,000 from a classmate of mine from Cornell, and $50,000 from the Small Business Administration. And then in April of 1985, I opened Montrachet.
Which, this restaurant, when it opened, I'm sure we'll get into the stories that come with the opening, but what advice do you have for getting the money, for leveraging your network, which is something that seems like you've had a real talent for a long time, is knowing the right people and knowing how to manage those relationships. Maybe you can give us some advice there.
Well, the financial supports the creative. And if you don't have money, you can't do anything. But you have to understand the era, the 80s. You could run businesses profitably. Things weren't inflated. Prices were reasonable. And the people who had pledged to me when I was a captain at some of these restaurants, customers, I said, if you ever decide that you want to open a restaurant, talk to us, we'll invest. So when I presented them with the business plan, almost everyone said no. So really, my first restaurant, it was my money, my partner's money, and the Small Business Administration, and that wasn't even enough. But with $150,000, we set out to build a restaurant from scratch because it wasn't a restaurant space. And we did, but if 7 weeks into it, if we hadn't gotten the 3-star write-up from the New York Times, which we did, for a $16, that's 1/6, 3-course meal, who knows what would have happened. But that's the equivalent of winning the lottery without being able to collect the cash. And that restaurant went really for 21 years.
So what was it about? There's a lot to cover. You have such a impressive career. What was it about Montrachet that you think really was successful?
Well, my intentions at the beginning were not to open a French restaurant. In fact, I wanted to open an American restaurant. I had business cards printed up that said Silverado Trail Project. Silverado Trail is a beautiful place in Napa. I was really turned on. American food was the thing. And then one night, I'm at La Grenouille, and somebody ordered a bottle of Le Montrachet and Louis Latour. And as I'm opening the bottle, I'm looking at the bottle, and it's gorgeous green gold color Montrachet. And I was like, that's it, you know. Why am I trying to reinvent the wheel? Let's just open a place called Montrachet. So that's when it changed my mind. David Bouley, I had met in 1983. I'd just run the New York Marathon. 3 days later, I took a plane to the West Coast. I went to Spago. I went to Michael's. I went to Campton Place. I went all over California because that's really when the food in America was at its apex. And on the last day, I'm in San Francisco at a restaurant called Sutter 500. The chef, Hubert Keller, the sous chef was David Bouley. I went for lunch there, and he blew me away. Just did a meal that was just unbelievable. I came back to New York. David, if he ever thought about wanting to do a restaurant in New York, he did. You know, it's...
Did you know David before this?
No, not at
Okay.
all. I was introduced, a captain, somebody I had worked with. Actually, it's very interesting because he had worked in the kitchen at La Reserve, but when I went to work at La Grenouille, I told them about my opportunities at La Grenouille. They were trying to recruit other people, and he came to work as a captain at La Grenouille. He had never worked in the front of the house. He was always a chef, but he knew Bouley. They had worked together, and he said, you know, if you're in San Francisco, you should look my friend up. But he hadn't told me anything about, you know, the guy's talent or anything. It's just that we sat in that restaurant, and what he did was he served us a lunch of dishes that, you know, he had worked at Roger Verger, he'd worked at Freddy Girardet in Switzerland, he had worked at Paul Bocuse, and it was like this unbelievable food. Colorful and gorgeous, you know. So what happens? You know, I come back to New York, and I was like, yeah, this guy really impressed me, and you know, his food was fantastic. When we decided that, you know, he was going to be the chef and he was going to do it together, and you know, one day he said to me, he says, "Why don't we call the restaurant Bouley?" And I was like, you know, back then you didn't name the restaurant after yourself. There were no restaurants named after themselves. You know, maybe one or two, but it was Joe's. You know.
Yeah.
So I said, no, David, you know, you have to understand, if you name a restaurant Bouley and it doesn't work, you can't use your name again. So that doesn't make any sense. And now David Bouley and I did this for 13 months. That restaurant went for 21 years, but he was only my chef for 13 months because the day that, June 7th, 1985, the day we get 3 stars from the New York Times, and the article was almost 100% about him. There was like one paragraph where Brian Miller, the food critic, said, the owner, Drew Nieporent, put together a nice wine list. The day after that review, every single chef stealer in America tried to steal David Bouley. And he had, you know, I'd never done anything except, you know, back him up. Or, I thought I was being very generous with him, but every single person who wanted to offer him an opportunity where he could leave. And of course, he never confided in me and said, you know, I'm getting these opportunities. So one time, you know, there were people in the dining room sitting next to a couple or whatever the situation was, and David came out, and David sat with them, and my friends who were sitting right next to them, they said, you know, he's discussing another restaurant with these people. And that was kind of like the scenario. So I grabbed the sous chef, you know, in the kitchen. I said, you see that? You see that? You know, David was sitting down. I said, if anything ever happens here, that's the reason. And then 13 months later, I basically got rid of everybody. I mean, I'd worked it out where that story's too involved, but I basically found a chef, an entire kitchen crew. We were closed Sundays, went in Sunday, prepped up for Monday, gave David the keys, and that's, you know.
It's well documented in
Chefs.
I think Chef's Drugs and Rock and Roll, Andrew Friedman's book, gets into the details of that situation, and it's really interesting. But I think what's really interesting is your ability to surround yourself with incredible people too. I mean, you didn't know David prior to going out to California, but you were able to convince him to fly across the country to be a part of what you were doing. I think there's some meat on that bone that we can, you know, cut off and learn from.
I think my mother, being a casting director and casting, you're trying to find the right actor for the part. You know, something she certainly rubbed off on me. I wasn't ready to settle. I always wanted somebody, if I'm casting for a chef, I want the best person I can possibly find. I don't think it's a coincidence that over the course of my 35 years of owning restaurants that, you could point to a number of chefs that are all like stellar. And then, my collaboration with Nobu, of course, and that comes in 1994. Nobu is, to me, a historic moment in American cuisine. Right now, all it is an economic juggernaut. In the face of restaurants that don't do very well, Nobu is, it's an amazing accomplishment. There are now 50 Nobus around the world.
That's incredible. I was going to ask.
Nobu hotels. But, the trajectory, basically, it's, my story is that Montrachet was this incredible success, and I worked every single day. But Robert De Niro came in as a customer, and when Robert De Niro's girlfriend, looked up from the table one day and said, Bob wants to know if you ever want to do another restaurant in Tribeca. And I said, are you talking to me? Because, you have Robert De Niro, he's in his 40s then. He'd always sit with his back to the room at Montrachet, but he's proposing another restaurant. We walked up the block. We looked at the space. I asked him what his vision was. He was his usual inarticulate self. So I said, you want it to be like La Coupeau in Paris? Yeah, like La Coupeau in Paris. So basically I knew I would be able to form the idea. And so here, with 200 seats, that's what we have at Tribeca Grill. 5 years, 1990, 5 years after Montrachet, we opened Tribeca Grill. And it was an extraordinary moment because the anticipation.
I kind of want to tap the brakes real quick because there's one thing that has me super curious, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. After I think you said 13 months, was it that David was with you?
Yes.
You were able, and you knew this instinctually, which shows how much kind of just like natural ability you have just to pick up on how people react. You knew that if you got rid of the chef, the kitchen would follow. The kitchen would be
his kitchen would follow him. Yes,
the kitchen would follow him, and you had the intuition to train up a whole nother team on the side and have them ready to go, and then to make that transition. How were you able to keep the culture? That's really what I'm interested at, because I'm sure that there was this culture that formed around David separately, and then you had to maybe. When that left, did a piece of that culture go with it? How did you keep the culture so strong to the point where you're able to maintain that notoriety? And obviously, the success wasn't on David's shoulders because when he left, you continued going.
Right.
So how did you keep that culture so strong when losing half your team?
Restaurants used to be about the owners. And a lot of the restaurants I went to as a young person, the owners would cook in the day and work the front of the house at night. In 1983, I worked at a place called 24 Fifth Avenue, and I put the name of the chef on the menu. Working with Leslie Revson, who was a sort of a notorious woman chef in the Village. And I put her name on the menu, and the owner came to me and said, why do you have her name on the menu? I said, it's like a movie, they're starring such and such. And so it was always... I always believed that the chef was the most important component to a restaurant because the food was most important. But in '85 at Montrachet, I knew that restaurant. It was kind of a kill or be killed moment. He was going to basically try to take the 3 stars that we had earned, put them in his bag, walk across the street, steal 2 of my dishwashers, and open shop. I wasn't going to let that happen. So, I had to preempt that. So I wasn't able to find a talent like David Boulay. So I basically hired a friend. And I knew I could control the friend from a food standpoint, and I knew the way the restaurant ticked. And, we had a small crew. The loyalty essentially was that, it was like 4 people. But I respected the fact that they would be loyal, and that's why I replaced everybody. I had nothing against the other people, by the way. Bill Yosis, who was our pastry chef, went on to be the pastry chef at Tavern on the Green, the Four Seasons. We stay in we used to stay great friends. I just, unfortunately, the Four Seasons just closed, but he and I stay great friends. So the whole point, though, is, it was really a kill or be killed moment. It goes back to that confidence that you have in what you know.
Well, what I'm picking up and what I'm feeling is that you knew that it sounds like there was a divide. There was the restaurant might have been split between David's crew and your crew, and you recognize that when that you knew that you needed to maybe own all that together, and you were preemptive. You didn't let it happen. You didn't let the divide happen. Like you saw where it was going. You were proactive, and you brought everything together the way it needed to be before it came crumbling down. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Well, a little bit. I mean, when people make money in a restaurant, there really isn't a lot of problems. The only problem was he was planning to do another restaurant. He was, and the manner in that he did it was all surreptitious. So I had to try to preempt that.
No.
So it wasn't like there was a divide. I got along with everybody.
Maybe that wasn't the right word to use, but I guess different intentions. He had an intention to go on and do his own thing.
Right.
That's what I meant by divide. And you had an intention to be long-standing.
Listen, years later, Paul Lee Brandt. There was a movie, Matter of Taste, on HBO. We got 3 stars again. Same space, the Montrachet space. We got 2 Michelin stars. He cooked beautifully. And one day, a cook comes to me and goes, "So when are we moving to Brooklyn?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Oh, Paul says we have a project in Brooklyn." And, I think this was after 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure. And then I found out, they'd come to him. There's some hotel. I saw the spot. It was like, being cheated on by your wife, It's like, and the same thing came through, but it was also around, I think, Christmas time, which is the busiest time. So I didn't want to rock the boat. But, it's like when something like that happens early on, and how did I react to it? I did something in 1986 that lasted 20 years.
Yeah, it's incredible.
But now it's like, Paul Lee Brandt. How could it's about the character. It's the character of the people, and people. There's a lot of great cooks, but there's not a lot of great cooks with character.
Okay, we're back, and you were starting to get into Tribeca Grill. What did you do differently this time around? I know there was a lot of different variables. The first time around, you did it with all of your own money. You didn't have the money that you had this time around. So what did you do differently the second time around with 5 years of experience as an owner and with the buying power behind you?
Right. Well, Tribeca Grill is the coolest situation because, Robert De Niro wants to open a restaurant with you, but not just Robert De Niro. Sean Penn, Bill Murray, Mikhail Baryshnikov, Christopher Walken, Ed Harris, Russell Simmons, the Weinstein brothers. So all these people chipped in, and we raised, Peter Max, by the way, is an investor. All these people chipped in $2.5 million to buy the space, which was way overpriced. I thought we were getting totally ripped off. We had to raise another, I guess, $1 million plus to build it. And, but it's like when I'm signing all the documents and it's Drew Nieporent, Robert De Niro, Drew Nieporent, Bill Murray. I mean, what a kick in the ass that is. It's like, and then.
But just to think, 5 years earlier, you were doing this all on your own. You're that kid going for a run that had this opportunity fall into your lap. Now you're doing deals with these incredible names. I can't even imagine. I can't even wrap my head around.
And so I always say this. Sometimes you walk into a restaurant, sight unseen, and you look in and it's gorgeous, and you say, "I got to eat here." You don't know who the chef is, you don't know what the food is, but you got to eat there. With Tribeca Grill, with all those celebrities, it was like, oh my God! But we're almost being set up because right around that time, Planet Hollywood opened with Bruce Willis and Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. So we were like, being compared to that. But the only difference was when we opened this restaurant, we had such good food. I mean, stellar food. Don Pintabona, our chef, had worked for Charlie Palmer at the River Cafe, and He was one of the early chefs to go to Asia, and he brings back these delicious spring rolls and Asian style fried oysters, and everything he did was wonderful. But we see, the one thing as a restaurateur, most restaurateurs, they don't know jack. They just don't know food. I know food, but I'm not the chef. So I'm not going to tell, I'm not going to say, I want you to cook this dish this way. I'm going to give them free reign. But I am going to be coercive. I'm going to say, have you ever seen a baked potato sliced in I'm going to give them recommendations. And of course I want them to pick
make
up
it
on
their own.
Yeah. They put their own imprint to it, but I want them to pick up at least on my enthusiasm. And the problem sometimes with the chefs is, like most people, they don't want to take direction. They want to just do what they want to do. And we were also, in the early 90s, it was a moment of creativity in restaurants. We're all trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to be better than our counterparts. We can't serve the same chicken. Keep in mind, in the early days, the French restaurants, it was all the same food. Sole Veronique and, sauce Bernaise. And, now they're trying to bring back this crap. I hate to say it, but my buddy Thomas Keller, these retro restaurants, forget about that. It's like, this is ridiculous, but so anyway, we were trying to be creative at Tribeca Grill, and we were. It's a huge success. We're here 29 years.
Yeah. You put a lot of emphasis on food being a huge component. We know that's super important. Service, obviously, super important. But what beyond, if we pull some layers back and we go deep, what's happening behind the scenes? How are you managing these relationships? What were the benefits of having the ability to be tied to such incredible personal brands? Do you think that kind of influenced maybe getting the word out, the PR, the press you're getting because of that? Do you think that played into it?
Yeah, I mean, I learned early on that the food writers, they didn't want to be harassed by public relations people. Today it's different. In New York, the people who hired the PR people, even the writers would say, we'd rather the chefs contacted us or the owners contacted us. When I opened in London in 1997 with Nobu, everybody's handled. The PR there is, they're like lobbyists in Washington. But in New York, there were a handful of PR people. Now today, it's run rampant. Yeah. I mean, it's an industry, depending on who your PR. I know Bobby Flay, I think, uses 3 different PR people. But back then, so, I'd write a letter directly. I get on the phone. I spoke directly. I have enough chutzpah. I'm a New York Jew. I mean, I have enough chutzpah where I'll just pick up the phone. Now that we're in the age of cell phones, I give out my cell phone. I don't mind somebody calling me to make a reservation. That's what I do.
If you want to get comfortable, feel free to lean back with that mic. It will move to you.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
No problem. So, I can contest that you are somebody. I was really blown away because I reached out to your people, your team, and you called me back. You called me directly back, and that blew me. Like, I was like, whoa! Like, you never get a call directly from the person usually you're trying to get in touch with. There's usually somebody they deflect to.
Layers.
So that is something that is not as popular as it should be. Being like having that note, like it's a direct source. Like when people reach out to you, you reply, and I think that's a lost talent, a lost quality from restaurant owners today.
Yeah, I mean,
you can get kind of stretched thin. I get that.
I mean, listen, I prefer a hands-on situation. So, if somebody were to ask me to describe, how I work, I'm a hands-on. I show up for work, and I want to do something. I don't want to sit down in the dining room and take up a table and, drink the profits. I mean, it's never worked for me. As you get older, things change a little bit. But I always noticed in the restaurant business, the successful restaurateurs, they were all different types. The guys who ran the steakhouses, you'd never see them work the floor. They might be in an office someplace making up a hilarious ad or a quip for an ad, like Alan Stillman. I respect him tremendously, but you'll never see him in the restaurant. And then you'd see Tony May at San Domenico or any of the places he'd work the door. They were all different. I didn't pattern myself after any one of them. I sort of thought that the different times, if anything, Joe Baum was the guy that we all looked up to because Joe Baum had opened several restaurants for Restaurant Associates. He was creative. He was a man of detail. He went to Cornell in '43. So I would always try to compare myself to Joe Baum. But the day that I have the opportunity to work at the Four Seasons, and we didn't tell that story, but I interviewed for the Four Seasons in 1983 when I was a captain at the French restaurants. And I went and I interviewed first with Tom Margatai, who's dead now. He just passed away. And he said, we all have to accept you. There were four people. Tom Margatai, Paul Covey, Alex Von Bitter, Julia Nicolini. We all have to accept you. I hope you understand that, yes. So then I met with Alex, who had a great relationship. When I met with Paul Covey, he was talking about wineries. He didn't even ask me a question. And Julian Nicolini was a friend of mine. I had attended wine dinners with him. I knew him, so he didn't interview me. I went away on this famous trip, met David Boulay. When I came back, I'm working lunch. Phone call comes in. Drew, Alex Von Bitter, and he's on the phone. He's Swiss, and he goes, listen, if you remember, we told you we all have to agree. Well, we didn't agree. We can't offer you a position. And I remember when I put down the phone, I thought of something that Michael Douglas once said, which he said, 4 out of 5 movies are made out of revenge. And I was like, fuck these people. I'm gonna be a great, they just passed on something. So you had asked me earlier about Tavern on the Green when I left, did the place go to pot? It's like Donald Trump being the president. We're not going to be able to calculate just how bad it is. We know it's bad, but we're just not going to be able to calculate, with Obama leaving and this idiot taking over, how bad it is. Now, I know, that, certain situations, that I effectuated, it had to be a better situation. But who can really say that? But at the Four Seasons, now look at how it all works out.
Yeah.
The guy who screwed me, who I stayed cordial with, I kept a professional relationship with, he took the biggest bullet. He took the biggest bullet. I mean, what goes around comes around. Who teaches that? You hope that that's the case. You hope if you live your life, fair and square, and you don't screw anybody, that the nice lights will shine on you. But it doesn't always happen.
Well, one thing, and we haven't even gotten into the details of Nobu and so many other restaurants you've opened since.
We have to have part 2.
Right. But one thing that I think is really important in Restaurant Unstoppable is less about the restaurants and more about the people behind the restaurants. Behind every great restaurant's a great person. That's the biggest lesson I've learned. Mm-hmm. So in just recently finishing Chefs, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, they reference you a few different times during that book. And one thing that I picked up just from that book is that it seems like you were the kind of person during this time in the 80s, in the 90s, there was a lot of interesting things going on with different chefs. And it always seemed like you were always championing, well, I don't know, that word's challenging me right now, but you were behind everybody else, all these other restaurants. When there was a new restaurant that came on scene, you were probably one of the first people there to eat and experience it. And if it was great, you weren't bad mouthing. You weren't, trying to make this. You were spreading the word. You were telling other people to go check it out. Right. And you've always seemed to really kind of get behind other greatness in the industry. Go talk me through that.
Well, I mean, specifically in Andrew Friedman's book, I think he probably talks about Blue Ribbon.
Yes,
because Blue Ribbon was a walking distance from Montrachet. It was a late night place. When I went there, I couldn't believe how audacious it was because it's a small place, but they were serving matzo ball soup and satay and oysters were in the window, and everything was done on a very, very high level. Now look at these guys. It's 35 years later, and they have many restaurants operating at a very high level. The Bromberg brothers, they're terrific guys, but again, that was intuitive. I knew that was better than most. And I would tell people, you got to go here. You got to go here. Charlie Trotter, anybody who would do these James Beard dinners, where do we go afterwards? So, go to Blue Ribbon. And apparently in the book, I'm pretty sure I remember that he shows up there right when they're closing because it was a blizzard. But they stayed open, and he ordered everything on the menu, spent a lot of money, and they were happy they stayed open for Charlie Trotter. But yeah, that's the kind of person I was. I will say this. The era of the restaurateur is over. In other words, guys like me, we're like dinosaurs. You know, if you hear that sound off in the distance? It's a dinosaur. You know, he's dead. Even the chefs, it's the only thing that the people relate to. They don't even cook anymore, but they're relatable. In other words, even myself, I swear to God, when I'm walking down the street, and my name is Nieporent, it's a little difficult, and nobody can go, "Hey, restaurateur." They go, "Hey, chef." And so even if people want to get my attention, they call me chef. So, I could just point to everything. Whether it's the TV Food Network. At the beginning of the TV Food Network, I did every show. I did Dining Around, Chef du Jour, Grilling with Drew. They created all these things. I'm a restaurateur. I'm not a chef. But then suddenly it was Mario and Bobby Flay, and the chef now is the only thing that matters. Most people don't know anything, and like Clint Eastwood went from being an actor to a director. Most of the chefs are restaurateurs. The craziest thing is Chef Zakarian once came up to me. This was years ago, and he goes, I'm not a chef. I'm a restaurateur. And I remember thinking to myself, you idiot. I said, the public relates to you as a chef. Just stay in your lane, Well, now he's like, the male Martha Stewart, or at least he's trying to be, because if he was a restaurateur, they see him as a businessman, and they couldn't relate. So the whole thing here, and really Andrew Friedman, he's really turned on by chefs. He's buddies with Waxman, and every time he writes a book, he wrote the Paul Brand book, and it's all about the chefs. But as a restaurateur with a foot in the food and knowledgeable about the food, I think I'm sort of the last of a dying breed. There might be one or two guys. I mean, I think there are several restaurateurs who do a better job than I do. I think Keith McNally is brilliant, and I think Steven Starr, of course, of late is, he's no longer Mr. Philadelphia. He's Mr. Everywhere. Yeah. So, I mean, and it's great. I'm just happy that I grew up in an era where I took what I knew as a nobody and a nothing, and I parlayed it into a couple of good places.
There's no way we can cover the details of the rest of your career, from Tribeca Grill on through Nobu and all the restaurants that have come and gone since. But if we could distill 3 variables from who you are, like I said, behind every great restaurant's a great person, reflecting back at your career, the things that you did right, that you could share with other people to pass on the torch to other people, the knowledge you have. What things would you share with us now in the short time we have left to empower the listeners?
Okay, I was very cautious and very conservative it's a business. I didn't want to ever lose any money. So, for instance, I'm offered an opportunity in San Francisco to open Rubicon, and I look at the spot, and it in the financial district, and it reminded me of the townhouses like Lutece in New York, and I said, I could do that. And then, Robert De Niro had been my partner, but guess who we got there? Francis Ford Coppola, Robin Williams. So again, you need all of this sort of pre-hype to a restaurant, and then what happens? We cast a lesbian chef in San Francisco, Tracy Desjardins. Perfect timing. The restaurant got 3 stars. That restaurant ran for 14 years. That was the biggest charity I ever gave to in my lifetime. But the huge lesson there was strike while the kettle is hot. Also, be in a place where culinary, the food is valued. San Francisco, they love food. They love wine. So, my opportunity of going on a plane and getting out to that just immersed me in a culture that was very, Zuni Cafe and Wolfgang Puck and, all the things. So this all added up. We didn't make a dime in San Francisco. But in 1994, when we opened Rubicon in August, we opened Nobu. And it's like, Nobu was like the Beatles. It's just me, Robert De Niro, a fellow by the name of Meir Tepper, an Israeli guy, and Nobu. And really, you probably would ask me to come back because Nobu said no the first time. Nobu said no the second time. Nobu said no to going to London. Nobu said no to everything. And yet today, as we sit here 25 years later, there are 50 Nobus in the world.
Why did he say yes the third or fourth time? What happened that made him say yes?
The truth is, well, in New York City, we had the spot, and once we got the spot, when we called Nobu, he said, "Well, I forgot to tell you that I'm opening a restaurant in the Park Meridian Hotel," and it was this whole thing. And he came, and Robert De Niro and I just killed him. And he said, "Maybe I'll never open a restaurant in New York City." But then the next day, he changed his mind, and in 1994, without a liquor license, believe it or not. We opened 1994. It was called No Booze. No, it was Nobu is his name. But I mean, we really basically talked him into it. Then the space next to Nobu becomes available. I had to sign the lease for that space in my own name because they wouldn't put any money up for it. That's how strong I felt about the second place. When I take a meeting with Christina Ang, who is married to B.S. Ang, the owner of the Metropolitan Hotel, to do the Nobu in London, he said no. And then what made him change his mind there was a Concorde ticket. And those days I would work, so I took the night flight into the morning flight, and as my cab is pulling up to London, I see them out in front of the hotel. And Nobu's got a huge smile on his face. I get out of the cab. I said, "I guess we're doing London." He says, "Yes." We went around the corner. We had some Chinese food, and we got back on the Concorde and came back to New York. And that's that. So Nobu was convinced based on, obviously our pushing him into the New York one, but the London one was a Concorde ticket.
Man, this is just me being curious. You let him use his name for the name of the restaurant.
Right. Well, no, that's very interesting. I named the restaurant.
Okay.
In other words, Matsuisa is his last name. It exists on the West Coast. So I always thought, let's call it Nobu. That's the more easy, familiar. His real name is Nobuyuki, but Nobu on the East Coast. And literally, one of my partners asked me, he says, "I don't understand. The brand is Matsuisa." I said, "Mayor, Matsuisa sounds like an electronics company. Just go with Nobu." And actually, that in itself created all sorts of problems because when we went to close the deals, Nobu's lawyer wanted a licensing deal for Nobu. I said, "What are you licensing? There is no Nobu." "Oh, his recipes, is this, is that." So anyway, the mere fact that to call it Nobu, which again, there's no question that was my call, 100%. He said, "You can call it Tokyo Rose. We don't care. But if you call it Nobu, you have to sign a licensing agreement." And that's made Nobu a wealthy person.
So what got us going down this path was strike while the iron's hot. What was it about the situation that made it a hot iron?
Well, in New York City, there was no Japanese restaurant ever that appealed to Westerners. Every Japanese restaurant was with tatami.
There was opportunity.
Yeah, well, the sushi screens and tatami rooms, they were marketing to the Japanese only. And, if you go to Japan, you realize when you go to a restaurant, it's just sushi, or it's just yakitori, or it's just eel, or whatever. When in America, everything is westernized and everything, you have a little this and a little of that. When you went to Matsuisa in 1987, when it opened on the West Coast, he's very charismatic, and he'd look at you and he said, "Let me cook for you," and then he'd bang you with a $150 omakase or something like that. So we did it a little bit differently in New York. We pruned the menu. We emphasized these signature dishes. I mean, the menu in Matsuisa was enormous. I mean, crazy book. And we just did a lot of things right, but we had a limited space. So guess what? We had no bar. We literally had no bar. So we had a service dispense out of what was the space was a bank. We served with the service bar in a vault, in the form of bank vault, and the sushi bar became the space for the sushi bar became the space that you would normally put a bar. But that restaurant lasted 24 years, closed 2 years ago because the landlord wasn't happy with the rent we were paying. Guess what? We moved. The space that we were in is still empty today, 2.5 years later.
So the mission, like I mentioned before, the mission of this podcast is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. How have you transformed since 1985?
You mean as a person?
As a professional, as a person, how are you different today? How have you evolved to the person you are today, the man you are today?
I think the biggest thing is I took risks, but I was conservative. If I'm the only person making money, then it doesn't work. Everyone has to make money around you. The biggest success, I mean, the sheer volume of opening 40 restaurants, Mexican, Centrico, Layla, Middle Eastern, Martha's Vineyard, Ryan Hardy, who's now at Charlie Bird and Legacy Records, was my chef in Martha's Vineyard. It's just the sheer volume of the number of places. And then in the middle of all this is Nobu. And what's happened with Nobu is just, it's unbelievable. Everybody, there used to be like you're spreading yourself too thin. There can't be enough number of restaurants. So just my personal story was I sort of saw myself a little bit like a director. So when the project was interesting or creative, I wanted to write the script, find the set, hire the actors, do as much as possible, don't sit on my laurels. But then things changed. I mean, the economics. Remember that the financial supports the creative. And nobody taps you on the shoulder, but 9/11 was a seminal moment because it was a moment of reassessment. All of our restaurants, majority of our restaurants, 10 minutes from the World Trade Center. So it was a question of trying to think what's going to happen here. And, by and large, we did the right thing. I mean, we had closed Layla, and then somebody wrote in lipstick on the window, "Drew, please reopen." And, I opened Layla not as a Middle Eastern restaurant, but as a Mediterranean restaurant. But, I mean, I think the other thing is my restaurants have stood the test of time. I still have Montrachet. It's called Betard now. It's 35 years later. Tribeca Grill, 29 years old. Nobu's 25
that in
years
itself
old.
is just amazing.
Yeah.
That type of longevity in this industry is unheard of, and congratulations on that. I just can't even imagine wrapping my head around that type of longevity. This has been a great conversation. I want to respect your time. We're back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor? A habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
Consistency. Just, when I come to work, they don't get a different person. They get the same person. If your personality is always erratic, I think you're going to lose people and you won't be successful. Consistency is important.
What is your biggest weakness?
I don't have any. I would say I don't trust people.
What is your biggest challenge today?
The economics of being in business. I mean, I think not just the restaurant business, but it's just very hard to make a profit, I think. And, I don't fool myself. If the numbers don't make sense, I can't open a business because you'll lose money.
What is one thing you look for when you're growing your team, when you're looking to bring new people on?
Well, I wish I could find somebody as clever as I was, but I've never had that happen. I see other restaurateurs hire people that we used to hire. Who are nice people, but they're just not, they have these overblown titles now, and, good luck.
Share one code of conduct or behavior, a way to be, a way to act, a core value you share with your team.
Just keep your hands to yourself. I would have to curse. Can I curse on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't shit and eat in the same place.
What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So this is a way to go above and beyond what's expected from the guest.
I think the most important thing is not to have anything scripted. I never give, when I talk to the servers, I never say, you must say this and, you must do this. And it's just for them to be themselves and to be natural. And, don't say bon appetit at the end of, after when you put the fucking food down.
What is one book that's a must read to make us a better person or a restaurant owner?
Ta-Nehisi Coates' books are probably at this time.
Say that name one more time for me.
I think it's Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Okay. And what are you getting from his books?
Just how difficult we treated black people in this country.
We'll definitely be linking to that in the show notes. So
Yeah.
what's one thing you feel restaurateurs do not do well enough or often enough?
Share the wealth.
What is one piece of technology you've recently adopted within your four walls that's had a huge impact on communication, efficiency, profitability, anything along those lines? And I mean, for somebody who's been in the industry for 30 years, the influence technology has had on this industry must have been really interesting to see that evolution.
Yeah, I was going to say 8-track, but truthfully, I mean, it's not an area that we're that proficient in, but certainly we keep up, with the current computers and reservation systems and things like that. There is one thing that's it's kind of nondescript, but the water system that we have, it's called Vero.
Okay.
If you think about a box that gives you chilled water in a bottle that they supply versus having every day to bring in cases of, Evian or Pellegrino and then throwing all that stuff away, just by creating this refrigerated box, still sparkling water coming out of it, that was an amazing innovation.
And that was a Vero?
A Vero.
Vero.
A Vero is a company that is like financial statements, and
we'll find it and we'll be sure to link to it in the show notes.
Vero, it's something small, but water is an important part of what we do.
First time mentioned on the show, and this is the last question. It's a doozy. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work in your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
The 3 pieces of wisdom: treat people with kindness and fairness, serve the best food, the best of your ability, and attract the best talent, and don't believe your own hype.
I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much, Drew. We wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. So who is one independent restaurant operator, somebody you respected and admire and believe would make a great guest on the show? Somebody that should be on my radar.
Oh, that's interesting. There's a fellow by the name of Kurt Zidesar. His last name is with a Z, but it's Gadesar or something like that. But he owns a Choto Mate. They just opened in Toronto. They have one in Miami. They have one in London. He sort of flies below the radar screen, but he's a very talented young man.
What was it, the first name one more time?
Kurt.
Kurt, look out. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And let the folks at home know if you want to come join your team. If you're looking to grow your team, what's the best way to connect with you and your people if you want to come join your team?
Just come into Tribeca Grill and introduce yourself.
Beautiful. This has been a great conversation. Again, just thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, your mentorship. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you.
Cheers.